there's nothing else that you take away from this lesson, I want you to know that you are not the user, and so just the way you might use something and how you might use it is not how the end user is going to interact with it, or not likely. And a lot of this has to do with mental models, and you spent a lot of time thinking about the design. Have that empathy with your end users and spend some time thinking about where they're coming from, and then spend some time watching them use your product. It's really, really insightful to see what happens when they're actually interacting with it. One of the questions I get a lot, I haven't touched on yet, is when to do usability testing. So when is this important? So every product has usability. It's either usable or not. And some components might have really good usability, others might have poor usability. When you think about evaluating the usability of a product, the question I get is when to do this, when should we do this? And since the goal is to drive change, the earlier the better, it's actually really common for companies when they start thinking about this to do usability testing after everything is done and built and designed, but then it's really hard to actually go back and make changes. So the best time to do usability testing is as early as possible and as often as possible. And so even if you have a sketch, an idea of something, you can actually do usability testing on that. You can have people walk through the system, even if it's a bunch of drawn screens, and see where they would click and what they think would happen if they clicked something, even if they can't. And then as you increase the fidelity of those designs, so it could be a clickable prototype, you can include some visual design, you can keep doing usability testing. And it's actually another reason to break up your budget. Let's say you have budget to test with 30 participants in a quantitative study. You could break that up and do 3 studies of 10 users or 6 studies of 5 users and actually get a lot more data as you're designing and learn as you go. Because then you actually also get to evaluate your second, like your alternative design. So let's say your navigation didn't work and you want to change the content. You can actually go make those changes and then test again and make changes and test again. We've talked about a lot of things in this course. I started giving a definition of usability, how usability is tied to user experience. It's really one component of the overall experience, but that depends a little bit just on your definition. It's okay if your definition of usability is much broader to be very similar to what user experience is. Then we talked about the underlying psychology of all of this, so why people run into usability issues and interacting with products. We talked about avoiding usability problems in your design, so starting off with a really good foundation by following best practices, usability heuristics, design pattern libraries, and then kind of concluded with how to do a usability study, which is by far the best way to understand if there are or aren't usability problems in your product, and then how to present the findings from that to actually get designers and engineers to make the changes that you want to see. If you haven't done the project yet, I really encourage you to start that. It's a 2-part project, one where you just do an evaluation of a design, one where you can actually run a usability study. And if you're designing your own product, then this is a great opportunity to understand where there aren't usability issues. But you could run a usability study on anything. Pick any app or website that you use a lot, that you either really like or you really dislike, and share your findings, share what you learned from doing this project. I definitely encourage you to take advantage of the opportunity to ask questions to each other. So upload your project as you're going and ask for feedback from other students, or if you get stuck in a place, ask for feedback, even if it's just coming up with which heuristics to use and which set of usability guiding principles you're going to go by, or which tasks you want to use for the usability study. These are great questions to ask each other and get feedback. I also encourage you to check out some of the other classes that we've put on user testing here on Skillshare for a deeper dive into some of the topics that I talked about today around usability. I've included several resources with this class, some blogs that are really fun to follow, just to kind of what's happening in the user experience field, who the big players are, what's being highly contested, some changes going on, but also just to kind of stay up to date on what's happening. And then also some books for beginners, but then also for more advanced user experience professionals. And so definitely check out the resources that I've included. Thank you so much for taking the time to learn about usability with me and learn how to evaluate your own designs for usability. Because of nothing else, what we want is to create great experiences for people. And one of the ways to do that is to prevent usability issues by testing early and often. If you want to delve further into the topic of usability and specifically user experience, I highly encourage you to look at the other user testing courses that we have up on Skillshare. If it's around the user experience and the customer experience, around how people interact with your company at different touch points. Our course on user journeys and omni-channel experience is great to kind of unpack how people move and transition between different channels. If you're really interested in the research side of it and the different ways to get user feedback, I highly recommend Janelle's course on different feedback methods.